Welcome to Vermontitude, a collaborative effort between Great Eastern Radio, the Brattleboro Reformer, and BCTV to bring you the stories behind the stories on the topics you want to learn more about. Because there's always more, so there'll always be Vermontitude. Hosted by me, Peter Fish Case. Welcome to Vermontitude. New episodes drop every Tuesday and can be found by going to vermontitude.com, reformer.com, brattleboro.tv, and locally on Comcast Channel 1078. We come to you from our studios at the Innovation Box on Landmark Hill. I'm Peter Fish Case, and each week I cover the topics that are of concern to Windham County and the towns that reside within its borders. Joining us today on the program, the president of Vermont News and Media, publisher of the Brattleboro Reformer, Jordan Brechenser.
Hey, Peter. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on. It was a long way to get in today.
Yeah, it was. So I think what we're talking about is sort of an interesting topic, at least to me, and I think to the folks who are interested in their local news and how it gets delivered and how it arrives. Senator Welch has sponsored a bill, and we were chatting about it. So I thought it would be interesting for folks to be kind of in tune to that.
No, certainly. Yeah, it's been a lot of back end work. So I guess it was about a year and a half ago, we had to make the difficult decision about how we distribute our print newspapers.
Right.
And while we're putting out news, 24/7 every day through a plethora of platforms, whether it's our app, whether it's our e-editions, whether it's our newsletters, our social media channels, the large majority of people here in southern Vermont still rely on their physical print newspaper to come to their doorsteps. And, as you can imagine, with staffing issues that, keep Dunkin' Donuts from being able to open some days of the week.
Yeah.
It was really difficult to have a workforce of carriers to deliver newspapers. I mean, you think about this job, you get up in the wee hours of the morning in your own personal vehicle, and you drive all through God's country to throw newspapers at people's doorsteps for not a whole lot of money, because at the end of the day, newspaper subscriptions aren't a whole lot of money.
Right.
And with, decades of struggling with that, we made the decision to piggyback off the postal service for delivery of the print newspapers. And that's not uncommon. It's a little bit uncommon here in southern Vermont, in the New England region. But for well over a decade, almost probably 15 years, newspapers have been the biggest customer of the postal service, delivering more pieces of mail on a daily basis with newspapers across the country. So it makes sense. You're piggybacking off of an infrastructure that's already there. Mm-hmm. There is a green component to it, since there's obviously postal vehicles, on every single street, 6 days a week. It really made sense for us to kind of follow suit with that. And that's what we did about a year and a half ago.
Right. And I know that came with some painful transitions and people understanding. But you've used a term to me that I think struck home, because it's called news deserts. Yeah. Right. And I think in order to avoid creating a news desert here in Windham County, this transition was made. Now, and the bill that Senator Welch sponsored kind of speaks to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's called Delivery for Democracy is the name of it. It's a bipartisan bill. I think there's about 10 or so senators across the country in varying states, both Republican and Democrats, who kind of realize that helping protect newspapers, to keep local journalism alive. They rely on it. Communities rely on it. And when you partner with the post office and you strike a deal, and this is real money, you pay the post office a sizable amount of money prepaid, and when the papers don't get delivered, there's no recourse. Right. And that's ultimately the problem with the post office. Is they're really, many years ago, DeJoy was put in place to run this like a business. And so in the last 3 years, newspapers across the country have seen a 40% increase to our rates. 40% increase to what we pay the post office in the last 3 years. And during that same time, many newspapers, ourselves included, have seen diminished delivery times due to staffing, due to economics, due to challenges of hiring. Yeah. They're all legitimate, but how can you pay more and more and more, try not to pass those increases off to your customers, and have a lousy delivery experience in many cases? And that's what this bill was designed to help protect
All right. Now, is this thing now? Has this been deployed yet, or are we still waiting for it to be deployed?
Yeah, no, it was announced, I think, about a month ago or so.
Okay.
And so the next steps are the bill to get reviewed and then, obviously voted on. But there's been a lot of momentum recently with legislatures across the country trying to find ways to help preserve local journalism. And this is one of them from the more of a functionality of delivery aspect, but it's on the docket along with many bills to help newspapers and local media stay, viable.
Yeah, and it does become hard, especially when you're, I mean, I know that you bump up against it, and what I do for a living, I bump up against it, and it's that sort of citizen journalism as it's called, which is fine. Sometimes It's how we find out, and we're able to drill in and get the real story, but sometimes that usurps what we're trying to do here. But are you looking forward to these changes being implemented?
Yeah, I mean, what it will do right now, there's no real recourse, and from my perspective, there's no real accountability at the post office. So I think some of the language in this will require the post office to meet a 95% delivery accuracy. And if they don't meet that criteria, they can no longer take these increases to the postal rates. It requires, I believe, another segment of some kind of annual reporting that shows about delivery, shows metrics.
Right.
So the committee can kind of look at that, and we as publishers can look at that, and to ensure the service that we're paying for, the service that our customers are ultimately paying for, is actually being realized. So I'm absolutely looking forward to that. I have a good relationship with most of the post offices that we deal with, and these are across, primarily Vermont, but into Massachusetts, into New Hampshire, and there's a lot of good carriers out there. So this isn't a problem that exists everywhere, but in some cases where staffing in post offices just can't get staffing, or the people running those shows just don't have the ability to help when there's a down route, people go without mail for days upon days. And, getting the newspaper daily and timely is important, but also things like medications, bills to renewal. I talk to people on a regular basis who now kind of look to us to help, and we have helped fix a lot of these problems. We've changed out postmasters. I put pressure on the head of the post office to make some changes here. We've done a little bit of good, but I talk to people all the time who haven't received a bill in the mail, and they don't know, and all of a sudden they're getting late fees, who haven't received the medication they need, who don't get their newspapers. And a lot of the people here in Southern Vermont, as you know, tend to skew slightly older. So getting that paper every day, physical, they don't want it digitally. They don't want to get it on an app or on their phone or a smartphone. They want to go to their mailbox, pick up their paper, see what's going on, do the comics, do the crosswords. And when the mail doesn't deliver for 2 or 3 days and they don't have that part of their routine, it's difficult to acclimate to.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, changes, I always joke around and say change is good right up until it happens.
True.
And this certainly is a big change. And, I commend Senator Welch for sponsoring such a bill, because it's critically important that we know what's going on in our community.
Yeah, I think what was the stats last year? I'll screw this up, but it was something to the tune of 200 and some odd newspapers went out of business in 2023. It left something like 2,000, I think, counties across the country without any form of local news. So nobody knows who's running for local offices. Nobody knows, what's happening at the local level. You kind of have to piece it together. And there's an underlying effect of that. I'll spare you the details since we only have a few minutes, but the underlying effect when that happens for too long and there is no watchdog, there is no centralized platform for disseminating news on the local level, your taxes go up. Bond ratings go up. Corruption goes up. All those things happen. And, it's challenging to run a news organization in this day and age of 2024. 10 years ago when you and I were young boys, the only real options were get your newspaper, listen to your radio station. That's how we disseminated news locally. Well, now on your phone, you've got 15 different apps that all pump out some kind of news. And people can pick and choose where they get it from, or if they get it at all. So that's the challenge of keeping local journalism alive and healthy.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's critical that this information, for all the reasons you pointed out last night in the select board meeting, we discussed parking rates in Brattleboro, and your publication printed something about that. A reader emailed me to ask me more questions.
Those little things.
But if that person doesn't get that newspaper, if that person doesn't know that the parking rate thing is being discussed, and he's not able to weigh in as a citizen, as somebody who might be concerned about that, and I'll never know.
Yeah, you'd never know, and the community would never know. I mean, newspapers are kind of the town square for democracy, and that's kind of an old cliche thing, and it's been lost over time. Newer generations, people who are of a different generation, don't quite have that same kind of affiliation with their newspapers. But as people age and they realize, oh, things are happening around me in my community that I'm not aware of, and my taxes go up, and I didn't realize I was funding this, Right. All of a sudden you realize, like, I need to know what's going on around me, and in any place, where do you find that? It's typically your local newspaper who are covering these kinds of things. So yeah, having partnerships with the post office and ensuring regular, consistent delivery, that's a vital piece to our, to our organization and our survival, really.
Yeah, I mean, local media is kind of a municipal checks and balances that sort of keeps everybody informed, that delivers news as to what happens, when it happens. And if we don't have that, you're right, there's a big breakdown.
There's a problem. Yep, certainly. So, we ask people to support it. And it's funny, people get their bills, and, somebody will call me, they didn't get their paper for 2 or 3 days, and we'll credit their account and deal with the post office to try to rectify it. But, it costs less than $1 a day to get a newspaper delivered to your house. I mean, just the economics of having newsprint and metric tonnage delivered to a press, have it printed, have it driven, all over the place to post office to get it there by a certain time to deliver. That's a lot of work. And really, you don't make money on subscriptions. We've never have as an industry. Right. We're moving towards that, but it's important for people to understand that and to support it. And obviously, the print newspaper is still, people perceive, when you say the Reformer or the Bennington Banner or Manchester Journal or Keene Sentinel, who just moved to mail themselves, in Keene, New Hampshire, you perceive it as a physical newspaper. But, we are putting out news on a daily basis in a variety of platforms. So it's just how people consume it is kind of what's changed and has made it more difficult to sustain print delivery in some cases. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I mean, I'll support it right along with you. I think it's a great bill. A news desert is a terrifying thing. And we'll try to avoid that as best we can. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. All right, man. Thanks for jumping on.